All right, let's dive right into something that completely changed the game for building with React: hooks. If you've been working with React for any length of time, you know that this wasn't just another update. It was a revolution. You know that feeling? You're following a tutorial from, say, 2017, and the code looks, well, almost like a different language. It's a super common experience, and 9 times out of 10, the reason for that difference is React hooks. This is basically the before and after story of modern React.
So to really appreciate why hooks are such a big deal, we have to rewind the clock a little. We got to talk about how we used to do things in the age of class components.
Back in the day, you kind of had 2 flavors of React components. There were simple function components, which were great, but they were, well, kind of dumb. They couldn't remember anything, they just took in data and spit out some UI. If you needed your component to have any kind of memory or do things at specific times, what we call state and lifecycle, you had no choice. You had to use a class component.
And this is where the headache started. I mean, classes worked, but they had some real pain points. You had the this keyword, which was a constant source of confusion and bugs for everyone. The syntax was just a lot. Components would get huge and hard to read. Plus, logic for a single feature often got smeared across different methods, making it tough to follow. And worst of all, if you wanted to share logic between components, you'd end up in what developers called wrapper hell. This nightmare of components nested inside other components, it was a mess.
So seeing all these challenges, the React team went back to the drawing board and came up with a much simpler, way more elegant solution: hooks.
So what even is a hook? It's really simple at its core. It's just a special JavaScript function. You can spot them because their names always start with use, and what they do is let you hook into all those powerful React features, like state, but from those simple function components we talked about. All that power with none of the class baggage.
And here it is, the magic number: React version 16.8. This is when hooks were officially released. And trust me, this wasn't just some minor bug fix release. This was the update that changed everything.
Now, there are a whole bunch of built-in hooks, but you don't need to know all of them to get the big idea. To really understand their power, we just need to look at the 2 you'll be using constantly.
Just look at this. The difference is night and day. On the left is the old way. To get a simple counter going, you needed a whole constructor method, you had to call super, you had to set this.state. It was a whole ceremony. And on the right, that's the useState hook. One single, clean, easy-to-read line of code. That's it. It gives you the value and a function to update it. So much better.
If you take away just one thing about useState, let it be this: it gives your components memory. It finally lets those simple functions remember things from one render to the next. Okay, the other big one is useEffect. Now, before hooks, if you wanted to, say, fetch some data when your component first appears, you would put that logic in component didMount. Then, if you needed to clean something up when it disappears, you'd put that in a totally different method, component willOnMount. See how the related logic is split apart? Well, useEffect fixes that. It lets you put your setup code and your cleanup code right next to each other. It all just lives together, which makes so much more sense.
So the key idea for useEffect is that it's your component's bridge to everything outside of React. Need to talk to an API? Use an effect. Need to set up a subscription? Use an effect. It lets your component interact with the wider world.
Now, using the built-in hooks is awesome, but the part that really unlocks a new way of thinking is when you start building your own.
And this is the real game changer. You can take primitives like useState and useEffect, bundle them together into your own function, again, starting with use, and you've made a custom hook. This lets you pull out complex stateful logic and reuse it all over your app with zero fuss.
And this right here is the direct solution to that wrapper hell problem we mentioned. Instead of nesting components inside other components, just to share a piece of functionality, now you just call a function. It's a flatter, simpler, and way more powerful way to compose your app.
Okay, so this new approach is incredibly powerful. But with great power comes, well, a couple of very important rules you have to follow.
The rules are super simple, but they're not suggestions. They're strict. First, you can only call hooks at the very top level of your function. That means no calling them inside loops, if statements, or nested functions. They got to be right out in the open. Second, you can only call hooks from a React component or another custom hook. You can't just call them from any old JavaScript function. So why so strict? Well, it's because React relies on the order in which hooks are called to keep track of everything. On every single render, it expects to see the exact same hooks in the exact same sequence.
That's the secret sauce that allows React to know which piece of state belongs to which useState call. It's how the magic works.
And that really brings us to the core takeaway. Hooks weren't just another feature added to the library. They were a fundamental change in how we think about building user interfaces. It was a shift away from the complex world of classes and lifecycles and toward a simpler, more direct, and more functional way of creating things. They didn't just change the code we write, they changed our whole approach. And that, right there, is what makes them so powerful.